Tranquility du Jour, April 9th, 2018. Hello there, this is Kimberly Wilson, and welcome to the 418th edition of Tranquility du Jour. Interviews with authors, activists, and artists around the globe. Today we're chatting with Victoria Moran, who's been on the show a few times before, and she is the co-author of the Main Street Vegan Academy Cookbook. And last time, of course, we heard from her co-author, J.L. Field. So this is part 2. And in this week's edition, we're chatting about myths of eating a vegan diet, the idea of actually living a detox, right? So we recently went through the detox program with Year of Tranquility, and I offered it up to the Tranquility du Jour community. And we talked about what it would be like to actually live that way all the time, finding healthier treats everywhere, and we chat about her Main Street Vegan Academy, which I graduated from in August of 2013. So before we dive into hearing from Victoria, I wanted to remind everyone that on Saturday, we have our spring virtual retreat, which is a half-day virtual happening live from the Pink Palace in Washington, D.C. We'll have a live audience, and it's open to everyone. It's 3 hours from noon to 3 Eastern time, and it's 3 hours devoted really to nurturing your inner artist through creative play, seated yoga, and mindfulness. And there'll be a lot of inspiration, education, time for reflection. And if you haven't done one of the virtual retreats before, it's a really, really sweet experience. And people tend to have rave reviews about the experience, particularly this idea of being able to not have to travel far to actually indulge in a little bit of nurturing self-care. And again, without having to, travel the globe to experience it. So a little bit of feedback is I absolutely love the retreat today. Such a great way to spend a Saturday. Participating has reminded me how good it feels to slow down and give myself the time to recharge. Feeling a new spark of creativity. Loved connecting with all of you and look forward to more. I love this one. Just looked in the mirror and I think I look younger than I did this morning. I'm so relaxed. What a fabulous morning. And there's more if you go to kimberlywilson.com/virtual retreat, including photos that people snapped of their experience on retreat, which is just so, so sweet. And so I've done these over the past few years, and this is the first time I've done a half day. They're usually 6 hours. This one will be 3. And it's $49, and again, 12 to 3 Eastern Standard. And if for any reason you can't make that time, you can still join us kind of in spirit, and then you'll get the recording for the retreat that you can use. The great thing is you can use it over and over again, and it's all video, live video for 3 hours. So a few upcoming events. We've got, of course, Year of Tranquility, which you are welcome to join at any time as a monthly subscriber or as an annual subscriber. And annual subscribers get all sorts of fun treats, including 50% off mentoring with me, 25% off Tranquility, and a recording of everything that happens during this year. And of course, the half-day retreats that'll happen on Saturday and the fall, all included in that membership option. Also, if you're local, on April 20th, I'm doing one of my quarterly writing labs at YogaWorks, formerly known as Tranquil Space. And it's a fun kind of 2-hour experience of doing writing prompts together. Also, June 9th at Burleigh Manor Animal Sanctuary, Yoga and the Animals. And this event is almost full. So if you're interested in joining us, it's in Ellicott City, Maryland. So not too far from, say, Jersey or Philly or DC, all the above. Would love, love, love to have you. Pinning in Paris, if you would like to escape to Paris with me and a wonderful group of ladies. There's one spot left in that. That's July 23rd through the 27th. And then I've got a retreat in West Virginia in October, back to Costa Rica in February, and then Tranquility in Tuscany in July of 2019. So you can find out more in the show notes. Now, without further ado, Victoria Moran. So she's been a Main Street vegan for 33 years, and she currently holds the title of Peta's Sexiest Vegan Over 50, alongside her male winner, Joel Kahn. She's an obesity survivor, maintaining a 60-plus pound weight loss, and she's the best-selling author of 12 books. Her college thesis became Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic, an Exploration of Veganism, originally published in 1985, and the first work on vegan philosophy and practice to come from a major publisher. You can learn more about Victoria in the show notes. Welcome, Victoria.
Hey, Kimberly.
Always a treat to have you back on the show. I think this is the third interview.
Wow, well, we've known each other a long time then. And I keep running into more and more of your fans all over everywhere. You just do such beautiful work in the world.
As do you. Thank you very much. And, it's, you just keep putting out new books. And so I have to interview you about them. And your latest, of course, Main Street Vegan Academy Cookbook. Congratulations on this with J.L. Fields.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's really fun. I heard somebody say that Melville was asked why he wrote Moby Dick, and he said because it's just as easy as writing a cookbook. And I thought that was a joke until we started this cookbook and found out, it's very detailed, and we do have recipes and tips from 60 of our graduates, some wonderful tips from you. So yeah, there's a lot of energy in there. And a lot of kind of everybody's mom's and grandmother's best recipe veganized.
Yeah, which is so fun to see that, from like people's traditional family dishes, done in vegan ways.
Which just goes to show that we don't have to give anything up. It's just the most wonderful thing. I love living in 2018. Despite certain variables. But last night I went to bed and tweeted, just this week, Versace committed to not using fur, and the Girl Scouts are selling a vegan cookie. The world is really waking up in many, many beautiful ways.
I love it. That's amazing. Yeah, the fur thing has been great. Michael Kors, now Versace. I mean, it's like there's been a really big shift within the fashion world, and I love it.
Oh, there really has. And I had always said that the fashion industry was more cruel than the meat industry, because the meat industry, animal foods, if people wanted plant-based foods instead, that industry would provide those. They don't care what they're selling. But the fashion industry always wanted to educate us on what's beautiful and what we're supposed to want. But now they really are responding to public sentiment. It may be for the first time ever. It's wonderful.
It is. It is. It's beautiful to see. And, what I love, too, about this book, because you do talk about fashion, and we'll get there in a moment, but what I love about this book, too, is Chapter 2, The 50 Shades of Vegan. There are lots of ways to eat plants and respect animals. Your way is just right. And it's a lot about various myths, right? Like, this is not a diet. Veganism is not a cult.
Yeah, it's really funny. I think whenever something is new or different, sometimes people have ideas about it that have maybe a grain of truth from somewhere, but it's just a wonderful way to live, and you really can do it your way. So many people find out about veganism or about eating plant-based through a book or a film, and they just assume that that's the only way to do it, when that's one way to do it. And there are a million other ways. When I was on tour with my book, Main Street Vegan, which started Main Street Vegan Academy and the cookbook and so much else, I was being driven in Chicago by the most adorable young man, 22 years old, just out of college. And he said to me, I don't know why anybody has any trouble going vegan. I mean, if I want a pepperoni pizza, I have a vegan pepperoni pizza. If I want a chili cheese dog, I have a vegan chili cheese dog. And I'm thinking my arteries are clogging just sitting next to you.
Right.
And yet, for a 22-year-old guy, he's doing everything just right. And I do things differently. And there's room for both of us.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like my arteries are clogging just listening to you. Now, what about the myth that being vegan is expensive? What I love is there's, a lot of people out there that are like, how to be vegan on $5 a day, or, there's a lot of really great, plant-based on a budget. You may follow her out from the West Coast. There's some really great suggestions and tools out there, but I'm curious, what do you find with regard to busting this myth of being vegan is expensive?
Well, it's like anything else. One of the analogies that I use is going to college is expensive. If you go to NYU, it's very expensive. If you go to community college and then a state university, not very expensive. It depends on how you do it. So today I was at a private natural food store here in New York City, and I was thinking, my God, some of these packaged prepared foods, especially the raw foods, are really expensive. I saw packages of crackers for $15. I mean, really expensive. So yeah, if that's the way you want to go, then you can spend a lot of money. But that's the NYU of eating vegan. You don't have to do it that way. You can eat really simple, basic foods. I mean, the beans and rice is always, what people pull out first because those are so cheap. And beans, of course, swell up if you buy them dry, and they're even cheaper after you cook them and when you bought them, and they were cheap then. So just looking for things in season, buying your produce in bags, finding places where it's just cheaper to shop. In a lot of cities, that's a farmer's market, which is the best and the freshest anyway. In some places, New York City, for example, the farmer's market, not so cheap, but Trader Joe's is cheap. And you just figure out how you want to do it. And I also, Kimberly, just want to put in the word for maybe not making it so cheap. Now, obviously, if you're on a very tight budget, and believe me, I've done this. I was a single mom living in the central Missouri Ozarks and writing freelance for health food store publications. So didn't have a lot of money way back in the 80s and did that as a vegan. That worked, but it also works if you are at a place in your life where you do have some disposable income. Why not put more of that into your food instead of into some other things? Because it's an investment in your future. So organic, of course, is investing in a healthier planet and in supporting farmers who want to do things the very best they can. More produce. I remember reading that a cup of blueberries a day, according to the National Institutes of Health, could forestall Alzheimer's, even in people who have that gene. Well, I ran right to the store to get blueberries, and I saw that they were like $7.95 for half a pint or something awful. And I thought, well, gosh, there are going to be a lot of very cognitively rich people around, and the rest of us maybe not so much. But then I figured out that you can get the frozen wild blueberries, which are off the charts with antioxidants. They leave cultivated blueberries in the dust. And they're cheaper, they're organic, and you can get them year round. So you just figure it out. You can do this on your budget, whatever your budget is.
And I think, too, the importance of bulk, like as you mentioned, buying nuts and seeds in bulk.
Oh, yeah. And again, I don't work for Trader Joe's. I certainly don't mean to be giving them any plug. In fact, I just saw last week they did something bad on the animal welfare front. They were saying that some of their eggs came from places with bigger cages or whatever, and then it turns out they didn't. So no advertisement here, but just the fact, at least where I live, nuts and seeds and dried fruits at Trader Joe's, very cheap. I go once a month just for those items.
And what about being vegan is complicated? So I think for a lot of people, like I just led a detox through Tranquility du Jour and through, it was so fun. And Year of Tranquility. And it was basically like, of course, no animal products, no caffeine, no alcohol, no sugar, no gluten. It was like, people were like, I don't know what I'll eat. And to me, the animal product thing is much easier than say like gluten. I think that's hard for a lot of people who love their carbs. And then also, sugar, of course, highly addictive. So whenever we think about this idea of veganism being complicated, how do you best break it down for people so that we could actually live a detox almost every day?
Well, it's really true. I love it when some churches put their congregations or allow their congregations to participate in what they call the Daniel fast, because there's a story in the Old Testament that Daniel and his friends were captured by the king and they refused the meat and the alcohol. And at the end of this period of time, they were more muscular and stronger than the king's soldiers. So all these people in these churches go on this Daniel fast, but what it is just being vegan. So they're all thinking that they're fasting when really they eat like you and I eat all the time. So I think it's really important to look at least as much, if not more, at what you're adding as at what you're cutting out. Because most of us just barely scratch the surface of fruits and vegetables. Maybe we eat apples, oranges, and bananas, and maybe we eat peas and carrots and lettuce and tomatoes. But the plant kingdom is so vast that you could never get through all of it in a lifetime. And so many of these foods are just so delicious. And that's even before we get to the nuts and seeds and the gluten-free whole grains or non-gluten-free whole grains. You know, you certainly don't have to be gluten-free to be vegan. I choose to be, a lot of people choose to be, but vegan just means you're not eating animals or anything that comes from an animal. So it's pretty simple. I think for a lot of people, the complication fear is about cooking. How do I cook? It's a whole new way to do food. But it's really so much simpler. And when I think about cooking meat, and it's been a really, really long time for me, really long time, but I do remember that you had to keep the kitchen like a hazmat unit. You know, if you cut up a chicken, you know, your kitchen was contaminated and there was all this cleaning and thawing. It was a lot. And actually, on practically any way that you want to be vegan, it's going to be simpler. Your pots and pans don't get as gritty and nasty. It's really very simple and fun.
Well, and you know what I love too in the book is, of course, you have all these great contributors who gave tips. And Darlene Taylor, I love this, and I just thought I would share for our listeners her super simple Sunday plan. So prep veggies for snacks and meals by slicing and chopping carrots, celery, bell peppers, cucumbers, whatever other crunchy veggies you like. Number 2, prep individual smoothie bags for each morning. Load zip-top plastic bags with cut fruit and greens needed for each smoothie, and then store these in the freezer and take them out individually when you need them. Because yeah, for me, whenever I make a green smoothie, like I pull all this stuff out of the freezer, stuff out of the refrigerator, stuff out of the cupboard, and like to have it all kind of like prepared where you just throw it in the blender, so much faster.
Yeah, that's super easy. But even the way you do it is so much easier than let's make, I don't know, Eggs Benedict.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it takes me like 5 to 10 minutes max, you know, and it's so simple. I need simple. Make a batch or 2 of snacks. So kale chips, for example, or protein bars. She mentioned, I love the protein balls myself, and you can munch on those all week long. And then last, cook sweet potatoes and brown rice or quinoa for the week. Tofu too, if you like it baked. And it's interesting too with the brown rice. I mean, I'm like such not a cook that what I actually buy is the frozen brown rice that you can steam in the microwave. And then I just add some veggies that I've also steamed in the microwave and then a little bit of Bragg's, you know, aminos on it. And I am like happy as a clam. So that's another.
I didn't know about frozen. Now I've gotten the brown rice in the pouches that you can just keep in the cupboard and then steam them in a couple of minutes. Or, you know, you could do what Darlene says and make the brown rice on the weekend and then steam it. And I'm not crazy about microwaves, but I'm still lazy. So if I want to steam rice that's either packaged or left over, I just put it in the vegetable steamer. And that's another thing that I've been doing recently. My husband eats a lot of raw food. He has really transformed himself. In the past 15 months, he's lost 75 pounds and he looks so much younger. This is so funny.
Wow. When
we were going out to eat different vegan places where people are more likely to know us, people would come in and they would seem really nervous. And I finally figured it out. They thought I had a guy on the side because they didn't recognize my husband. So that's the transformative power of food. But anyway, he's doing all his raw, which is great. And I do a lot of raw too, but I tend to get cold in the winter and I need cooked food. So I've been doing this thing where I put the big pot on the stove and the steamer, and then I put in the potatoes or squash or sweet potatoes that need a little more time to cook and give those like 10 minutes. And then I put in onions and garlic, so great for you, antioxidants and stuff like that. And then I'll put in maybe broccoli and then asparagus, because it just takes a couple of minutes, or spinach or something that just, you just want a tiny little bit of heat to just break down the fibers. And everything is just done. And it's this wonderful kind of Buddha bowl all in one pot. Maybe it's a Buddha pot.
I love it. That sounds yummy.
It has been my winter staple.
Isn't it funny? It's like I do that too, where I get on a kick and I'll make it and I'll make it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot have this for another 6 months, But it's like once you figure out something that works well for you and is simple, or doesn't take too much extra time or prep, it's like, it becomes a go-to.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And these things will happen for people who are new to this. It's just start somewhere. And even if you're not going to go completely all the way vegan overnight, just have more and more meals from the plant kingdom and see how you feel. And really up the fruits and vegetables. Don't be afraid of fruit. So many people are afraid because they think of fruit and sugar, and that the sugar in fruit is the same as the sugar in Cracker Jack. It's really not. The fruit is packaged in such a perfect way with so many antioxidants and phytochemicals that keep you young and happy. It's a wonderful way to live.
It is. And you know what, this kind of takes us into the next section where I want to talk about is igniting the kindness revolution, which is chapter 9. But, as you were saying, with all the nutrients, right, that come from the fruits and vegetables and really from the unprocessed, as you were saying, the guy who made your arteries clog, you can get all these, great fake options for people who like that. But I think sometimes it can be distorted or it's misunderstood. At least it was for me initially, that they were healthy. So I get these like faux, chicken fingers. And I was like, oh, well, it's healthy. And a friend of mine was like, no, it's not healthy. And you just assume since it's vegan, it's healthy. And I think that's something to really keep in mind, of make sure you're eating things as much as possible. And I know it's hard. And, even at the end of the detox, I'm like, I'm rewarding myself with a vegan pizza tonight, so I'm not always perfect, but I know that I observe the difference in myself whenever I am eating more of the fruits and vegetables, particularly my skin. Can you speak to that a little bit? Have you noticed shifts over the years?
Yeah, I think it has to do with hydration. There's a book by the famous dermatologist, Dr. Murad, called The Water Secret. It's not a fully vegan book, unfortunately, but he does explain what happens when you hydrate with fresh fruits and vegetables. It's a kind of water that gets into the cells to plump up your collagen in a way that just drinking a lot of water won't do. It makes a huge difference. I think that this is why the people who are in the raw food world have this glow. It's this fabled glow. Mimi Kirk, she was one of the first Peta's Sexiest vegans over 50. And now she's close to 80 and she's just glorious. Just wonderful, dewy skin. And I think the food has a lot to do with it. We need to wear hats and gloves and things like that too. But, we want to take care of ourselves on every level. And a really wonderful skin hydrating food is pomegranate. And generally, I'm not a big fan of fruit juice, love vegetable juices, want to have the fruit whole for the most part. But pomegranate juice, and you can just buy it in the bottle and mix it half and half or 2/3, 1/3 water or sparkling water to pomegranate juice, or just throw in maybe 1/3 of a cup into a smoothie. That's a really good one for skin.
Well, good to know, because, I was drinking the palm a little bit here and there, and then I just got out of the habit, or maybe I read there was like too much sugar in it or something. I don't know. I stopped it. But I'd actually forgotten about pomegranate juice, so that's good to know.
And, it's funny when we talk about veganism being complicated. It is complicated to cut open a pomegranate
yes,
and get all those seeds out. If you want to do it, my daughter thinks it's cool. She thinks it's fun. In fact, everything that's hard, whether it's a pomegranate or a young coconut or all these things that I find intimidating, she thinks are fun. But she makes her own seitan. She makes her own kombucha. She's one of those kind of people. And there's all kinds of great fun things that people who just love that can do. And those of us who want to be a little bit quicker, sparkling water and a splash of palm juice.
And, one of the things, too, you talk about in this chapter is traveling, the challenge with traveling. And I remember when you were in Paris, maybe it was a couple years ago. Oh. I remember, you mentioning it is so hard there. And so a friend of mine actually reached out to me. She lives in Nepal and she works a lot with elephant rescue. And she was like, I'm going to be traveling. I can't remember where she was. And she was like, what should I do? Is it one of those things where it's like you just kind of do the very best you can whenever it doesn't seem like there's a ton of options? And so I was curious for you how you survived in Paris and suggestions you might have for people who find that they're going to an area where it's just really hard to find things in kind of like the raw-ish kind of basic forms.
Yeah. Well, I went to Paris alone in the winter. I think that was really my problem more than anything else. But certainly if you've got the Happy Cow Guide, it tells you about all the restaurants and places where you can find food. And you just need to make it an adventure. I mean, I can remember one morning I went to a Starbucks and in my very best high school French, asked for my chai latte, soy, extra hot, no foam. And the guy, very deadpan, comes back at me in English and says, we don't have soy this morning. So I think, you have to have this wonderful kind of open-minded travel attitude, but in very practical ways, wherever you are, people are eating plants. People are eating vegetables and fruits. Certainly there are some parts of the world where you're not supposed to eat raw produce. That makes it a little bit tougher. But ethnic restaurants, wherever you go, when we think of Asian restaurants, whether Thai, Chinese, Ethiopian restaurants, Middle Eastern restaurants, they're the same all around the world. And one of the great saviors for me in Paris was that there was a Tibetan restaurant just across the street from me. And Tibetan food is certainly not all vegan or even vegetarian, but a lot of it is. And I was able to go there and get vegetable and rice dishes when I had gone everywhere else at some kind of hour when they weren't open, which seemed to be a lot. I could always go back to that Tibetan restaurant and find something. So, bon voyage.
And this is something that I've always struggled with. And I just haven't come up with the answer. So I've just said no. But you know how sometimes there'll be pre-made sandwiches and it'll have meat on it. And it's like, well, so sometimes I'll be like, oh, do you have one without meat? And they're like, no, but we can take it off for you. But the thing about it is like, then I feel like that meat is wasted and the animal like suffered for and then it's just tossed aside, which almost like it makes me really sad. So then I don't get it. And also I kind of don't want a sandwich that meat has touched, but I think I could work past that if there was a solution, but it's not like he's going to save that meat for some, there's no easy answer. So I just wondered what you or, other people thought about that, how to handle that situation.
Well, Kimberly, that was actually one of my first lessons in vegetarianism years before I stopped eating meat. I was 11 years old and flying to Europe, and the man next to me was Indian. And when it came time for dinner, the flight attendant brought the food and he said, oh no, I ordered a vegetarian meal. And she said, oh, well, we don't have the vegetarian meal on the flight, which sometimes happens. And she said, but I'll just take the Salisbury steak off the plate and bring you back everything else. And he said, no, thank you. I'll eat when we land. And I'm sitting there, 11 years old, really liking food and thinking, 7 hours? He's going to not eat for 7 hours just because of a piece of meat. And that really stayed with me. He inspired me, and I think was really one of my mentors for making this step. So like you, I wouldn't have that sandwich for both of the reasons that you cite. And sometimes you just need to be sure you've got something in your pocket, or that you're just willing to wait. It's rare, and nowadays, and it's so much easier than it ever used to be. Airports, truck stops, small towns. I mean, places that used to be almost impossible, all of a sudden have stuff. It's really, really wonderful. I mean, I went vegan in 1983, and comparing then and now, it's night and day.
Yeah. Thank goodness, right? That there are so many more options. You know what I love are those little containers. I even got this at a concert. Actually, it was a Hall & Oates concert my boyfriend took me to. And it was like those little, the little hummus containers. And then it also has the little pretzels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I can't believe I can get this at a concert,
Oh,
so,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I've heard, I don't personally go to NASCAR events, but I've heard NASCAR now has vegan options and vegan hot dogs. And to me, this is really where the processed vegan foods shine. I'm not going to buy vegan hot dogs and put them in my refrigerator simply because when I ate meat, I didn't eat hot dogs. I ate what I thought was better meat. And now I eat what I think are better plant foods. But at a sporting event, at a concert, of course I would have that and be grateful for it. So, you can be flexible. It's not like, like we said, it's not like joining a cult. You get to make your own choices, and there are lots of them.
Right. And, that leads me to another question I had for you, this idea about revolutionary compassion. And I love this because it says imagine if each of us woke up in the morning with this question on our minds. What can I do today to ease someone's pain, lighten someone's load, make someone's life better?
Wouldn't that be amazing? And what if we could enlarge someone to mean any being? I know you're a yogi, and I've done yoga for many, many years and have been to many different kinds of yoga classes. But very, very often, regardless of the style of yoga, the class ends with some variation of that beautiful Sanskrit prayer that says, may all creatures be free of suffering. May all creatures know peace and joy. May the thoughts, words, and actions of my life contribute to that freedom and that joy for all. And then people go out and very often eat animal foods. And so to just make the connection, that's all, just make the connection. And if it's important to you, if it's meaningful to you, once you've made it, your life will change. And the amount of support online, in documentaries, in books from real living people is just tremendous. It'll be easy, it'll be great, and you'll never be happier.
I love this too. It's heroism isn't determined by how much, the way we measure money in our bank account, or how many, the way we count followers on Twitter. It's just by the split-second choice to bypass the fear and grab the lobster, come out as a vegan, try tofu, wear a message shirt, host a turkey-less Thanksgiving, tell your spouse you want a meat-free home, raise a child who loves chickens more than nuggets. I love that.
Oh, thank you. Well, the part about grab the lobster, for anybody who wonders what that has to do with it, came from this lovely, lovely woman who was on my podcast a couple of years ago. She actually got a tremendous amount of, I call it flash press, for like 2 days she was famous around the world and then everybody forgot. But she had gone to the grocery store in her little town of 5,000 people in Ontario, and there was one lobster left in the tank. And I think so often we've all wanted to just get that one. And she wanted to do that so much. So she went home and went online and learned what it would take to send a lobster from an inland area to the part of the Atlantic where he or she came from. So she went back the next day. She bought the lobster. She took him to UPS. She had found an animal rights person in the coastal area who was willing to accept the lobster and take him or her back to the sea. And the UPS guys were so excited about helping and being sure that they did everything right so the lobster would arrive safely. The woman at the other end took the lobster to the beach, and at first the lobster was confused apparently and didn't quite know what to do. And then it was just like a light went on, and the lobster, as the woman described it, just kind of jumped into the ocean. The most beautiful, beautiful story. Now, a lot of people gave the woman who bought the lobster a lot of flack because they said she was just supporting the system and that store is just going to get another lobster to take the place of that one. And, that's true. And it doesn't mean everybody is supposed to go buy a lobster and do that. But that woman had the burden on her soul that she was supposed to save that one. And she did. And I just thought it was a beautiful story.
I love that. I love it. And let me ask you this too, Victoria. Okay, so you just had this book release. What next? I hear there's a documentary. You've got the Vegan Academy that I'm coming to, the master program in August.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy you're coming. But then I'm happy to see you anywhere and everywhere because you're one of my favorite people. Yeah, lots going on. The documentary is called A Prayer for Compassion. It had been called The Compassion Project until about a month ago when the filmmaker had this wonderful revelation that it should be called A Prayer for Compassion because it is about introducing vegan living to the 80% of the people on earth who identify as religious or spiritual. So we have 2 more interviews to do, and otherwise, Thomas Jackson, this wonderful Florida filmmaker, is in the editing stage. So we're thinking late summer, early fall release. So look for A Prayer for Compassion. And what else is going on? So I do my podcast like you. I haven't been doing it as long as you, but a long time, Main Street Vegan. So every week we're live Wednesday afternoons and then on iTunes and all that and have wonderful people on. We're going to have you on before too long. And then Main Street Vegan Academy, which is just my baby. My daughter has told me that in terms of grandchildren, I will only ever have dogs, so I accept that. But I already have 319 amazing grandchildren, some of whom are almost my age, but still 319 graduates of Main Street Vegan Academy in 23 countries around the world who come to New York City for a 5.5-day, very intensive immersion in all things vegan with a fabulous faculty. And we cover everything. We cover health, nutrition, animal rights and animal law, fashion. And then we get into more, how do you do this as a business? So we've got public speaking and coaching techniques and social media and digital marketing and branding and business building. So it's just, it covers the gamut, and because it's live and in person, it's a life experience that people tell me things like, other than having my children, this is the best thing I've ever done. And as you say, we do have a master program. We did one last year. We'll do it this year. And we're going to skip 2019 and then do a big, fabulous master program again in 2020. But that's just optional for people who have been through the course and who want to come back and get more on some of the more complex areas and some of the more advanced business things. We do offer that as well. And it just makes me so happy to have people as wonderful as yourself, and you were doing great things before you ever came to Main Street Vegan Academy, but to just know that there's a tiny contribution that I've made to your work and to the work of all these incredible people, it's a happy maker.
It is, and it's so fun. It's such an experience, as you said, from going to all the restaurants, to the different shops, and then Kat, who went through the program with me, who has her vegan cowboy boots.
Wonderful.
It's like so
Kat
cool.
Mindenhall.
Yes.
I was telling, actually, today, the woman who was blow drying my hair moved here recently from Dallas. And I said, oh, you got to know about Kat Mindenhall and her fabulous cowboy boots. And they're made in Texas by these classic boot makers, and there are only 35 of them left in the world. And the woman said, well, that's so cool because I've been vegetarian for 22 years. So speak up. You never know.
Right. And they are cute boots. I remember you wore them to the gala. Remember the Farm Sanctuary gala?
That's right. You did. Yeah.
Well, my last question for you, Victoria, is, kind of around the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. And so I'm curious for you how you find tranquility in your everyday, especially in the heart of New York City, which is not always the most tranquil place.
Well, I think somebody said to me a long time ago, you need to find places where you recognize yourself. In other words, what makes you feel like you? And we all have to spend time in our lives, and many of us have to spend time every day in places where we don't recognize ourselves, in decor that wouldn't be what we would have designed, maybe in a uniform or some kind of clothing that wouldn't be our first choice. But when you do have the opportunity to find a place where you recognize yourself, touch that every single day. So for me, I recognize myself all over New York City. In fact, all big cities. I love London. I like big cities. And so even though it's a place that rattles a lot of people, it calms me down. And I love coffee houses, and I don't drink coffee. And at this moment, I'm even off tea. I'm completely caffeine free at this moment in my life. But I still love to go into a coffee house and get some herbal tea and just sit there and be with my writing and watch the people, and then to be around wonderful friends, to look across the table and see somebody that I think is just like one of the top 500 humans on earth, and to think, oh my goodness, she's spending an hour and a half with me. She must think that about me too. So in all these ways, it's just you celebrate who you are, not who anybody else wants you to be. And I find a lot of tranquility that way.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Victoria, A, for the work you put out into the world, and B, for being on the show again.
It is my pleasure, absolutely my pleasure, and I'm just smiling as I'm thinking of your fans that I know, and they're hearing both of us, and the world is small, and I like that.
So in the show notes, there's a link to find Victoria, her website, Instagram, her many beautiful books, Twitter, and Facebook. Also mentioned in the podcast, there's a link to Main Street Vegan Academy and her Main Street Vegan podcast, along with my former interviews of the lovely Victoria around Main Street Vegan and the Good Karma Diet. There's also a link to find Compassion is the New Black Tea, which also comes with a Darling Pigs and Pugs t-shirt, and ways to connect on social media with me through Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Again, there's more in the show notes, from e-courses and signing up for Love Notes if you'd like to receive Tranquility du Jour straight to your inbox once a month. And it also gives you access to Tranquil Treasures, which has MP3s and PDFs and videos for finding more tranquility in the everyday. And finally, if you have a moment to pin a review of any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads, would be so happy, or a review of this podcast on iTunes. There's a link to it in the show notes. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I wish you a phenomenal week ahead, and I look forward to seeing some of you on Saturday. Namaste.